Chapter 1, The Diplomatic Oops. So there I was, floating in the zero-G medical bay of the Harmonious Convergence, watching Ambassador Crixtaltry to explain to the Galactic Health Council why his people were dying from what essentially amounted to cosmic hay fever. You know, just another Tuesday in the wonderful world of interstellar diplomacy. Honored members, Crixtal wheezed through his environmental suit, his blue-tinted carapace dulled by illness. The Zephyrian plague has claimed 12% of our population. Our medical facilities are overwhelmed. We require assistance. The holographic representatives of various species flickered around the circular chamber, each one looking about as enthusiastic as a tax audit. The Altarian delegates' tentacles twitched with what I'd learned to recognize as barely contained annoyance, while the Centauri representatives' three heads were having what appeared to be a heated argument with each other. Perhaps, suggested the lead counselor, a crystalline being whose name sounded like breaking glass, you should consider the newer members' resources. The humans, for instance. And that, folks, is how I, Dr. Ethan Cross, former trauma surgeon from Cleveland, current chief medical officer aboard humanity's first diplomatic vessel, found myself staring at a room full of aliens who'd just volunteered Earth for the galaxy's most awkward medical emergency. Humans. Crixtal's voice carried a note of desperation mixed with, was that hope? But they've only been in space for what, 50 of their years? 53, actually, I interjected, pushing off from the wall to float closer to the holographic display. And we've been doing medicine for a few thousand years before that, if it helps. The silence that followed was the kind you get when you tell your grandmother her meatloaf tastes like cardboard. Technically accurate, but probably not the right moment for honesty. The crystalline counselor's form shifted through several prismatic colors, which I'd learned meant they were accessing their databases. Dr. Cross, according to our records, human medicine is primitive by galactic standards. Define primitive, I said, crossing my arms. Look, I wasn't going to let some sentient chandelier insult my entire species' medical achievements just because we didn't have fancy anti-gravity surgery tables yet. You still use, what do you call them, scalpels? Among other things, yes. More prismatic shifting. Cutting into patients? Well, when you put it like that, it sounds barbaric, I admitted. But yeah, sometimes the best way to fix what's broken is to open it up and take a look. The Altarian delegates' tentacles were now practically vibrating. Barbaric indeed. We solved such crude techniques millennia ago with our quantum cellular restructuring protocols. Right, I said, trying not to sound too sarcastic. And how's that working out for you with this Zephyrian plague? The tentacles went very, very still. Crixtal's environmental suit hissed as he adjusted his breathing apparatus. Dr. Cross, if I may ask, what would humanity's response be to such a medical crisis? Now that, my friends, was a loaded question if I'd ever heard one. How do you explain to a bunch of aliens that humans have this weird habit of treating every problem like it might require both a medical degree and a tactical nuclear strike? Well, I said slowly, we'd probably start by sending medical supplies, doctors, research teams. That sounds reasonable, the counselor noted. And a full battle group to make sure nobody interferes with the relief effort. The silence was back, but this time it had brought its friends confusion and growing alarm. A battle group? Crixtal's voice cracked slightly. For medical aid? I shrugged, or at least made the zero-G equivalent of a shrug. Look, you want our help or not? Because I guarantee you, if we're sending doctors into a plague zone, we're sending enough firepower to make sure they come home safe. Chapter 2. Earth's Subtle Diplomatic Response. 48 hours later, I was standing in the observation deck of the medical ship Florence Nightingale, watching humanity's idea of a modest medical response drop out of hyperspace above the Zephyrian homeworld. To be fair, the Nightingale itself was exactly what you'd expect from a human medical vessel. Gleaming white hull, red cross symbols visible from orbit, and enough medical equipment to stock a dozen hospitals. Very reassuring. Very humanitarian. The fact that it was surrounded by the 3rd Fleet Battle Group? Well, that was just us being thorough. Jesus Christ, muttered Commander Vincent Hayes, the Nightingale's CO, as he stared out at our escort. I asked for a couple of destroyers, not half the damn Navy. Through the viewport, we could see the imposing bulk of the dreadnought Indomitable, flanked by 4 heavy cruisers, 8 destroyers, and what appeared to be an entire wing of assault carriers. Oh, and the mobile medical platform Asclepius, roughly the size of Manhattan, and bristling with enough medical technology to terraform a planet's biosphere. Admiral Knox sends his regards, I said, reading from the message pad I'd just received. He says, and I quote, "Any alien bastards want to mess with our doctors can discuss the matter with my guns." Commander Hayes rubbed his temples. We're supposed to be providing humanitarian aid, not preparing for the Third Galactic War. Hey, nobody's shooting yet, I pointed out. That's practically restraint by our standards. The comm system crackled to life. Dr. Cross to the communications center. We're receiving a priority transmission from the Zephyrian government. I made my way through the ship's corridors, noting with approval the bustle of activity. Nurses checking medical supplies, technicians calibrating diagnostic equipment, surgeons reviewing alien anatomy files. It was controlled chaos, the kind that meant people knew what they were doing. The communications center was a cramped space filled with holographic displays and enough computing power to run a small planet. The tech on duty, a nervous-looking kid named Williams, gestured toward the main display. "It's Ambassador Crickstal, sir. He seems agitated." The hologram flickered to life, revealing the ambassador in what appeared to be a government bunker. His environmental suit looked hastily assembled, and there was a distinct note of panic in his voice. "Dr. Cross, please, you must explain to your military commanders that this is a medical emergency, not an invasion." I blinked. Who said anything about an invasion? "Your fleet!" Crickstal's voice rose an octave. "There are dozens of warships in orbit. Our defense forces are convinced you're preparing to attack." Oh, right. I'd forgotten that most species in the galaxy had this quaint notion that medical aid and overwhelming military force were somehow mutually exclusive concepts. "Ambassador," I said in what I hoped was a reassuring tone, "those ships are just our escort. Standard procedure for any medical mission in potentially hostile space." "Potentially hostile? We asked for your help." "Sure, but what if somebody else doesn't want us helping? What if pirates decide a medical convoy looks like easy pickings? What if some rival faction tries to interfere with our operations?" There was a long pause. Do these things happen often in human space?" I thought about it. "More often than you'd think. Look, Ambassador, we take the safety of our medical personnel very seriously. Nobody interferes with our doctors. Nobody. The fleet is just there to make sure everyone understands that. But surely such a large military presence is unnecessary for—" The hologram flickered and was replaced by another figure. This one wore the sleek uniform of the Zephyrian Defense Force, and his expression suggested he'd been having a very long day. "Dr. Cross, this is General Vextar. I need to speak with whoever's in command of your fleet immediately." "That would be Admiral Knox aboard the Indomitable," I said. "Is there a problem, General?" "A problem?" Vextar's voice reached a pitch that probably shouldn't have been possible for his species. "Your ships are maintaining a combat formation. Your fighters are running patrol patterns. One of your vessels just powered up what our sensors indicate is some sort of planet-killing weapon." I winced. "That would be the Indomitable's main gun array. Don't worry, it's just standard readiness protocols." "Standard readiness protocols?" "Doctor, your admiral just sent us a message saying that any interference with the medical mission would result in what he termed aggressive dental reconstruction surgery performed at orbital velocity." Yeah, that sounded like Admiral Knox. The man had a way with words. "General, I assure you we're only here to help. The military escort is purely precautionary." "Precautionary?" The general's image flickered as what sounded like explosions echoed in the background. "Half our population is dying from this plague, and the other half is convinced you're about to bomb us into the Stone Age." This was going well. Chapter 3. Human Medicine Meets Alien Expectations. 6 hours later, I was standing in Decontamination Bay 7, watching the first batch of human medical personnel suit up for planetside operations. The scene looked like something between a space movie and a biological warfare drill, which, considering what we were walking into, wasn't entirely inaccurate. Dr. Rachel Winters, our chief of infectious diseases, was running final checks on her environmental suit while simultaneously reviewing her tablet. She was the kind of doctor who could diagnose rare tropical diseases while performing surgery in a hurricane, which made her pretty much ideal for alien plague duty. "Pathogen analysis is inconclusive," she reported, not looking up from her data. "Whatever this thing is, it's unlike anything in our databases. Attacks the respiratory system primarily, but there are neurological components we don't understand." "Fatality rate?" I asked, checking my own suit seals. "Among Zephyrians? About 30%. But Cross..." She looked up, and I could see the concern in her eyes through her helmet's faceplate. "We don't know how it might affect humans. Our biology is different enough that we could be completely immune, or it could kill us in ways the Zephyrians haven't even thought of," I finished. Yeah, I got that part of the briefing. The airlock cycled open, revealing our Zephyrian liaison, a doctor named Keltar who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. His own environmental suit was patched in several places, and his movements had the jerky quality of someone running on stims in desperation. "Dr. Cross," he said, his voice crackling through the translation system. "I must again express my gratitude for your assistance, and my confusion regarding your escort fleet." Through the bay's viewport, we could see the Indomitable hanging in space like a metal mountain, its gun batteries trained on empty space in what Admiral Knox probably considered a non-threatening posture. "Think of it as insurance," I said. "We're here to help, but if anyone tries to stop us from helping, they're going to have a very bad day." "But who would want to stop medical aid?" I exchanged glances with Dr. Winters. Sometimes I forgot that most of the galaxy hadn't spent the last few millennia perfecting the art of being absolutely terrible to each other. Pirates, rival governments, religious extremists, people who think your plague might be divine punishment, people who want to steal our medical technology, people who just don't like humans. I ticked off the possibilities on my fingers. "Trust me, there's always someone." Dr. Keltar's suit deflated slightly. "Your species lives in a very dangerous galaxy." "Nah," said Dr. Winters, shouldering her medical kit. "We just make sure we're the most dangerous thing in it when someone's trying to hurt innocent people." The shuttle bay was a hive of activity as the first medical teams prepared to deploy. Unlike the sterile, high-tech shuttles favored by most galactic species, our dropships looked like someone had armored a city bus and strapped rockets to it. They were ugly, loud, and absolutely guaranteed to get you where you were going, even if the entire planet was trying to stop you. As we strapped in for descent, I noticed Keltar staring at the shuttle's interior with what I was learning to recognize as alien bewilderment. "Doctor," he said carefully, "why does your medical transport appear to be equipped with weapons?" I looked around the cabin, noting the defensive gun mounts, reinforced bulkheads, and what was definitely a missile rack disguised as a supply compartment. "Well," I said, "you never know when someone might try to shoot down a medical shuttle. Better safe than sorry." "Someone would shoot down medical personnel?" The shuttle pilot, a grizzled veteran named Kowalski, laughed from the cockpit. "Doc, you should see what they tried to pull during the Martian flu outbreak. Pirates figured a medical convoy would be easy pickings." His voice took on a distinctly satisfied tone. "They figured wrong." "What happened?" Keltar asked, though I wasn't sure he really wanted to know. "Let's just say," Kowalski replied, "there's still debris orbiting Mars with 'medical personnel have right-of-way' painted on it." As we broke atmosphere, I got my first good look at the Zephyrian capital city. It should have been a gleaming metropolis of crystalline spires and floating platforms, according to the cultural briefings. Instead, it looked like someone had turned off half the lights and left the other half flickering. The medical district was worse. What should have been orderly hospitals and research facilities looked more like refugee camps, with temporary structures sprawled across every available space and lines of 6 Zephyrians stretching for blocks. "Dear God," whispered Dr. Winters. "The plague spread faster than we anticipated," Keltar explained, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Our medical infrastructure was never designed for this kind of crisis. We've lost nearly half our medical personnel to the disease." The shuttle touched down in what had once been a memorial park, now converted to a landing zone for emergency medical craft. As we disembarked, I could see Zephyrian medical staff watching us with expressions that mixed hope, desperation, and not a little fear. And I couldn't blame them for the fear part. Even in environmental suits, humans had a way of looking like we were about to either save your life or end it, depending on what the situation required. Dr. Winters was already pulling out her equipment, scanners and diagnostic tools that looked primitive compared to the sleek Zephyrian devices, but had the distinct advantage of actually working. Within minutes, she had a portable lab set up and was running analyses on everything from air samples to patient tissue. "Interesting," she muttered, studying her readings. "This isn't a traditional pathogen at all. It's more like a symbiotic organism that's gone haywire." I looked over her shoulder at the data. "Symbiotic how?" "Near as I can tell, Zephyrians evolved with this thing. It's supposed to be part of their respiratory system, helps process certain atmospheric compounds. But something's made it aggressive, turned it from helper to killer." Keltar's environmental suit hissed as he leaned closer. That's impossible. The Vactile symbionts have been part of our biology for millions of years. They're essential to our survival. Not anymore." Dr. Winters said grimly. Something's corrupted them, turned them hostile. Question is what? That's when the shooting started. Chapter 4, when medical missions get complicated. Look, I know what you're thinking. Cross, you're saying. How does a medical mission turn into a firefight? And that, my friends, is the kind of question only someone who's never worked with humans would ask. The first sign of trouble was when my comm unit started screaming alerts in 3 different languages, none of them friendly. The second sign was the distinctive whine of energy weapons charging up somewhere in the medical district. The third sign was Kowalski's voice cutting through the chaos with professional calm. Medical teams, we've got incoming hostiles from the northeast. Recommend immediate shelter while we sort this out. Through the haze of the plague-ridden city, I could see movement. Armed figures in environmental suits, moving with military precision toward our landing zone. They were firing on anything that moved, which unfortunately included several Zephyrian medical facilities. Who the hell are they? I shouted over the noise, grabbing Dr. Winters and pulling her behind a concrete barrier. Keltar was frantically working his communicator. I don't know. Our defense forces aren't reporting any hostile action. That's when the Indomitable made its presence felt. The orbital bombardment wasn't actually an orbital bombardment, technically speaking. Admiral Knox was far too professional to level a city without clear orders. What he did instead was drop a single kinetic projectile, a telephone pole-sized chunk of tungsten, into an empty plaza about 200 meters from the hostile force. The explosion was visible from orbit. When the dust settled, the shooting had stopped, and my comm unit was buzzing with an incoming message from the Admiral himself. Dr. Cross, Admiral Knox here. I trust that demonstration was sufficient to clarify the rules of engagement. Through the smoke, I could see the hostile forces retreating at a pace that suggested they'd suddenly remembered urgent appointments elsewhere. Yes, sir, I replied. Message received loud and clear. Outstanding, Knox out. Keltar's environmental suit was making distressed beeping noises. Was that... Did your Admiral just destroy a city block to protect medical personnel? Empty city block, I corrected. And technically he was just demonstrating our commitment to providing uninterrupted medical services. Dr. Winters emerged from cover, already back to analyzing her samples. Cross, I need to get these tissue cultures to the ship's lab. This symbiont corruption is unlike anything I've seen, and I think I know why. Why? She held up her scanner, displaying a molecular diagram that looked like someone had taken a normal cellular structure and hit it with a sledgehammer. This isn't natural evolution. Someone engineered this. The implications hit me like a cold shower. You're saying someone deliberately turned the Zephyrians' own biology against them? That's exactly what I'm saying. This is biological warfare, Cross, and whoever did it is probably still out there. As if on cue, my comm unit chimed with another priority message. This time it was from Admiral Knox, and his tone had shifted from professionally cordial to professionally homicidal. Dr. Cross, we've detected 3 unregistered vessels attempting to jump out of the system. They appear to be carrying biological research equipment. I looked at Dr. Winters, who nodded grimly. Admiral, I said, I believe those vessels may be connected to the plague. Recommend you discourage their departure. Copy that, Doctor. Discouraging their departure now. Through the atmosphere, we could see brief flashes of light as the Third Fleet engaged the fleeing ships. It was over in seconds. You don't run from a human battle group unless you're in another human battle group, and even then it's iffy. Vessels secured, Knox reported. We'll have salvage teams aboard within the hour. Keltar was staring at us with an expression that was probably the Zephyrian equivalent of shell shock. You just captured enemy vessels based on a medical officer's suspicion? Hey, I said, in our experience, when someone starts shooting at doctors during a plague response, they're usually up to something. Chapter 5, The Cure That Came with Terms and Conditions. Hours later, I was standing in the Nightingale's main laboratory, watching Dr. Winters work her particular brand of medical magic. The lab looked like someone had crossed a hospital with a weapons research facility, which wasn't entirely inaccurate. When humans did medical research, we tended to approach diseases like enemy combatants that needed to be defeated. Got it, she announced, straightening up from her microscope array. The biological agent was definitely engineered, probably by the hegemony. The hegemony. Of course it was the hegemony. The galaxy's self-appointed superior species, convinced that everyone else was taking up space that rightfully belonged to them. They'd been suspiciously quiet since humanity joined the galactic community, but apparently they'd been keeping busy. Admiral Knox's image flickered to life on the lab's main screen. Behind him, I could see the bridge of the Indomitable, all business and barely controlled violence. Dr. Cross, our interrogation of the captured vessels confirms your assessment. The hegemony has been conducting biological warfare experiments on multiple species, using the Zephyrians as test subjects. How many other species? I asked, though I was pretty sure I didn't want to know the answer. At least 12 confirmed, possibly more. They've been systematically weakening potential rivals by corrupting their native symbiotic organisms. Dr. Winters looked up from her work. The good news is I can synthesize a cure. The symbiont corruption is sophisticated, but it's still just corrupted biology. We can restore the original symbiotic relationship. And the bad news? The cure will need to be administered to every infected individual, and the manufacturing process requires resources we don't have on hand. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest that came with impossible medical decisions. How long to produce enough cure for the entire Zephyrian population, with our current facilities? 3 months minimum. They don't have 3 months, I said. The latest casualty reports showed the plague accelerating. At current rates, the Zephyrian species would be extinct in 6 weeks. That's when Admiral Knox cleared his throat, which in my experience meant he was about to suggest something that would either save everyone or start a war. Dr. Cross, he said, what if we had access to hegemony biological manufacturing facilities? I stared at his image. Admiral, are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that the hegemony owes the Zephyrians some rather substantial reparations, and it would be a shame to let all that manufacturing capacity go to waste. Through the lab's viewport, I could see the rest of the Third Fleet maneuvering into what military types called a diplomatic formation, which was essentially the same as a combat formation, but with more polite radio chatter. Sir, I said carefully, are we talking about seizing hegemony territory? We're talking about emergency requisition of medical manufacturing facilities to address a humanitarian crisis caused by biological warfare. Knox replied with the kind of precision that suggested lawyers had been involved in phrasing that statement. Purely a medical operation, you understand. A medical operation that requires a battle fleet? Dr. Cross, I'm shocked that you would suggest our humanitarian mission requires military oversight. We're simply ensuring that no one interferes with the manufacture of life-saving medicine. I had to admire the man's style. Only humans could turn an invasion into a medical mission and somehow make it sound reasonable. Dr. Winters was grinning as she prepared her equipment. Cross, I'm going to need a Class 5 biomanufacturing facility with quantum cellular manipulation capabilities. Know where we can find one? As a matter of fact, Admiral Knox said, our intelligence indicates the hegemony has several such facilities in the Proxima Centauri system. They've been very helpful in providing us with detailed schematics of their defensive positions. How thoughtful of them, I said dryly. Quite? We'll be jumping to hyperspace in 30 minutes. I suggest you prepare your medical teams for an aggressive treatment protocol. Chapter 6. Aggressive Medical Intervention. The hegemony's primary biomanufacturing facility orbited Proxima Centauri 3 like a metallic tumor, all sharp angles and aggressive architecture designed to intimidate anyone who might question their right to exist. It was exactly the kind of structure you'd expect from a species that thought biological warfare was an acceptable diplomatic tool. What they hadn't expected was for a human medical mission to show up with enough firepower to sterilize a solar system. Attention hegemony facility, came Admiral Knox's voice over the comm system, broadcast on all frequencies. This is Admiral Knox of the Terran Third Fleet. We are conducting an emergency medical operation and require immediate access to your biological manufacturing equipment. The response was about what you'd expect from genocidal space fascists. Unknown vessels, you are in violation of hegemony space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. I was in the Nightingale's observation deck, watching the ballet of destruction that followed. The hegemony facility was defended by what had probably seemed like adequate firepower before humanity showed up. A dozen patrol craft, orbital defense platforms, and enough energy weapons to glass a small moon. Against a human battle group, it lasted about 45 seconds. Facility secured, Knox reported, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a job well done. No casualties among the medical personnel. Any casualties among the hegemony forces? I asked. Define casualties. I decided I probably didn't want to know. Within an hour, human engineering teams had occupied the biomanufacturing facility and were busy converting it from biological warfare production to medical manufacturing. The process involved a lot of technical terminology that basically boiled down to, we're going to make medicine instead of plague weapons, and we're going to make a lot of it. Dr. Winters was in her element, directing teams of technicians as they reprogrammed the facility's quantum biological assemblers. The machines themselves were impressive. cathedral-sized chambers filled with molecular manipulation equipment that could build custom organisms atom by atom. "This is incredible," she said, reviewing the facility's specifications. "With this equipment, we can synthesize enough cure for every infected Zephyrian in the galaxy, plus create vaccines to prevent reinfection." "How long?" I asked. 72 hours for full production. We'll have the first batch ready for deployment in 6 hours. From across the facility's control center, I could hear one of the captured hegemony technicians protesting to his human guards. "You cannot simply steal our manufacturing facilities. This is an act of war." Commander Hayes, who was overseeing the operation, looked up from his tactical display. "Sir, we're not stealing anything. We're commandeering medical equipment to address a humanitarian crisis that your people caused." "This is outrageous. You have no legal authority?" "Actually," Hayes said, pulling out a tablet, "according to Galactic Health Emergency Protocols, Section 47B, any species engaged in biological warfare forfeits their right to control biological manufacturing facilities until the crisis is resolved." The hegemony technician sputtered. "That regulation doesn't exist." "It does now," Hayes replied cheerfully. "Admiral Knox had the lawyers draft it while we were in hyperspace. Amazing what you can accomplish with proper legal representation." I had to admire human efficiency. Most species would spend months debating the legal implications of seizing enemy facilities. Humans just made sure the lawyers worked faster than the engineers. My comm unit chimed with an incoming message from Ambassador Crixtal back on Zephyr Prime. His image appeared on my tablet, and for the first time since this crisis began, he looked like he might actually believe his people were going to survive. "Dr. Cross," he said, his voice trembling with emotion, "our initial testing of your cure has shown remarkable results. The symbiont corruption is reversing in all test subjects." "That's excellent news, Ambassador. We'll have enough cure for your entire population within 3 days. 3 days, he repeated as if he couldn't quite believe it. When we first contacted Earth, our projections showed complete species extinction within 6 weeks. Now you're going to be fine," I said. "That's what we do." There was a long pause before Crixtal spoke again. "Dr. Cross, if I may ask, why did your people respond with such overwhelming force to a medical emergency?" I looked around the commandeered hegemony facility, where human medical teams were working alongside captured enemy equipment to save an entire species, while a battle fleet maintained a protective perimeter around our operations. "Ambassador," I said, "when someone's sick and asks for our help, we help them. When someone tries to stop us from helping them, we remove the obstacle. It's really that simple." But the military response, the seizure of hegemony territory, the orbital bombardment, all medical operations, I said with a straight face. "We needed to ensure our doctors could work without interference. We required manufacturing facilities to produce the cure, and we had to discourage any additional interference with our treatment protocols." "Treatment protocols," Crixtal repeated slowly. "Aggressive treatment protocols," I corrected. "Sometimes medicine requires a firm hand." Chapter 7. Post-treatment evaluation. 4 weeks later, I was back on the harmonious convergence, floating in the same medical bay where this whole mess had started, except now it felt more like a victory lap than a desperate plea for help. The Zephyrian plague was officially eradicated. Every infected individual had been treated, vaccinations had been distributed to prevent reoccurrence, and the species population was already showing signs of recovery. The hegemony's biological warfare program had been permanently discontinued, along with several of their more aggressive territorial expansion plans. Ambassador Crixtal looked like a different person, or a different alien technically. His carapace had returned to its healthy blue-green sheen. His movements were steady and confident, and his environmental suit was now purely ceremonial rather than life support equipment. "Dr. Cross," he said, "on behalf of the Zephyrian people, I want to express our eternal gratitude for your assistance." "Just doing our job, Ambassador." "Your job," he repeated, then gestured toward the viewport where the Third Fleet was still maintaining its protective formation around the diplomatic vessel. "Is it always so comprehensive?" I followed his gaze to the Indomitable, which was currently running training exercises with its escort squadron. The Dreadnought's main guns were tracking simulated targets with the kind of precision that made it very clear why the hegemony had decided to pursue a more peaceful foreign policy. "Like I said, we take the safety of our medical personnel seriously." The holographic display in the center of the bay flickered to life, showing the assembled members of the Galactic Health Council. They all looked like they'd spent the last month trying to figure out exactly what had happened, and whether they should be impressed or terrified. The crystalline counselor was the first to speak, her prismatic form cycling through what I'd learned were colors of confusion. "Dr. Cross," she said, "your species' response to this medical emergency was unprecedented." "Thank you. That wasn't necessarily a compliment. I'm choosing to take it as one." The Altarian delegate's tentacles were twitching again, but this time it seemed more like nervous energy than annoyance. The destruction of hegemony biological warfare capabilities, the seizure of their manufacturing facilities, the orbital bombardment, selective kinetic intervention, I corrected. And technically, we didn't destroy their biological warfare capabilities so much as convert them to pharmaceutical production.
"You invaded their space!"
We conducted an emergency medical intervention in response to biological warfare against a member species, I replied. All perfectly legal according to the regulations Admiral Knox's legal team filed with the Galactic Court. The Centauri representatives' 3 heads were having another argument, but this time it seemed to be about whether humans were insane or brilliant. From what I could make out through the translation system, 2 heads were voting for insane. "Dr. Cross," the lead counselor said carefully, "while we appreciate the effectiveness of your response, we must ask, is this how humanity intends to conduct all medical assistance operations?" I thought about it for a moment. How do you explain to a bunch of aliens that humans have never really learned the difference between helping someone and conquering their enemies? That we're constitutionally incapable of half measures when people's lives are on the line? "Counselor," I said finally, "when someone asks Earth for medical help, we help them. When someone tries to stop us from helping them, we stop being asked and start being told. It's worked out pretty well for us so far. But surely such aggressive methods saved an entire species in 4 weeks," I interrupted. "Your non-aggressive methods were going to let the Zephyrians go extinct while you debated the proper diplomatic protocols for addressing biological warfare." The silence that followed was the kind you get when someone states an uncomfortable truth that everyone knows but nobody wants to acknowledge. Ambassador Crickstall cleared his throat, or made the Zephyrian equivalent sound. "If I may, honored counselors, I believe Dr. Cross makes an excellent point. The human response was unorthodox, but it was also immediate and effective." "But the military implications," the Altarian delegate protested. "The precedent this sets for future medical emergencies is that people who conduct biological warfare against civilian populations will face swift and overwhelming retaliation," I said. "I'm struggling to see the downside here." My comm unit chimed with an incoming message from Admiral Knox. His image appeared on my tablet, looking remarkably pleased with himself. "Dr. Cross, thought you'd like to know. We've received formal requests for medical assistance from 17 different species in the last month." 17? Apparently word has gotten out about our comprehensive approach to healthcare delivery. The requests range from pandemic response to surgical consultation, with a few cases of what appear to be medically related territorial disputes. I raised an eyebrow. "Medically related territorial disputes?" "The Rigel Confederacy is claiming that their neighbors' refusal to allow medical supply shipments constitutes a health emergency requiring immediate intervention. They've requested our assistance in negotiating safe passage for their medical convoys. And I've assigned the Second Fleet to provide medical escort services, purely humanitarian, of course." Of course. I could already see where this was heading. In 6 months, the galaxy would be the healthiest, most medically advanced collection of species in known space, primarily because everyone would be too terrified to let their citizens get sick. The counselor's prismatic form was cycling through colors I'd never seen before, which probably wasn't a good sign. "Dr. Cross," she said slowly, "are you suggesting that humanity intends to militarize medical aid throughout the galaxy?" "Counselor," I replied, "we're suggesting that medical aid shouldn't require military protection, but if it does, we're prepared to provide it." Ambassador Crickstall was nodding enthusiastically. "The human approach has much to recommend it. Swift response, overwhelming capability, and absolute commitment to patient welfare." "Patient welfare," the Altarian delegate repeated faintly. "Exactly," I said. "Look, it's simple. If you're sick, we'll help you get better. If someone tries to stop us from helping you get better, We'll help them understand why that's a bad idea. If someone is actively making you sick as part of some political or military strategy. I shrugged. Well, that's when things get interesting. Chapter 8. The New Galactic Medical Standard. 3 months after the initial crisis, I was back in my office aboard the Nightingale, reviewing the quarterly medical reports from across human-patrolled space. The statistics made for interesting reading, assuming you found complete societal transformation interesting. Medical emergency response times were down 847% across all human-allied systems. Pandemic containment protocols had been streamlined from months of bureaucratic negotiation to show up with overwhelming force and fix everything immediately. Biological warfare incidents had dropped to 0, mostly because nobody wanted to explain to Admiral Knox why they thought weaponized diseases were a good idea. Doctor. Winters knocked on my door and floated in, carrying her own stack of reports, and wearing the expression of someone who'd been having a very good day. Cross, you need to see this, she said, handing me a datapad. Medical outcomes across the galaxy have improved by orders of magnitude since we started our aggressive humanitarian intervention program. I scanned the data. Life expectancy was up, infant mortality was down, and the number of species facing extinction-level medical crises had dropped to 0. There were also some interesting notes about improved diplomatic relations, increased trade agreements, and what the report diplomatically termed enhanced cooperation with Terran medical initiatives. Enhanced cooperation? Nobody wants to be the species that rejected human medical aid and then had to explain why to a battle fleet, Winters explained. It's remarkable how cooperative people become when you show up with both antibiotics and antimatter warheads. My comm unit chimed with another message from Admiral Knox, who'd apparently been having an equally good day. Dr. Cross, his image appeared on my screen. I thought you'd like to know that the hegemony has formally requested to join our medical assistance program. I blinked. The hegemony, the same hegemony that was conducting biological warfare 3 months ago? The very same. Apparently, their new leadership is very interested in what they call preventive medical diplomacy. Preventive medical diplomacy? They want to make sure their population stays healthy enough that they never need to request emergency medical assistance from humanity. I had to admit that was probably a smart policy. Any other interesting developments, Admiral? The Galactic Health Council has unanimously approved our proposal to standardize emergency medical response protocols across all member species. From now on, any medical crisis that threatens a species' survival will automatically trigger what we're calling comprehensive medical intervention. And what exactly does comprehensive medical intervention entail? Knox's grin was visible even through the holographic display. Whatever it takes, Doctor, whatever it takes. Epilogue. The Doctor will see you. Now. 6 months after the Zephyrian crisis began, I found myself back in the same diplomatic conference room where this whole adventure had started, except now the atmosphere was considerably different. Instead of desperate pleas for help, we were getting what could only be described as a parade of species eager to demonstrate how healthy and well-behaved they were. The Altarian delegate, whose tentacles had finally stopped twitching, was presenting a detailed report on their improved vaccination programs. The Centauri representatives' 3 heads were in rare agreement about the benefits of preventive medicine. Even the crystalline counselor had upgraded her medical databases to include human treatment protocols. Ambassador Crickstal was there too, looking healthier than I'd ever seen him, representing what was now being called the Zephyrian medical miracle in diplomatic circles. Dr. Cross, the lead counselor said, 6 months ago, the Zephyrian species was facing extinction from biological warfare. Today, they have not only recovered but have become one of the most medically advanced civilizations in the galaxy. They've also become one of our strongest allies, I noted. Funny how that works. Indeed, the effectiveness of human medical intervention has been noted throughout the galaxy. Through the conference room's viewport, I could see the latest addition to humanity's medical fleet, the Hippocrates, a hospital ship that had grown from the original Asclepius platform into something the size of a small moon, escorted by enough firepower to level a solar system. It was currently providing medical services to the Rigel system, where a mysterious outbreak of diplomatic cooperation had broken out shortly after our arrival. Dr. Cross, Ambassador Crickstal said, speaking for all the species that have benefited from human medical assistance, I want to ask, what drives your people to such comprehensive humanitarian efforts? I thought about it for a moment. looking around the room at representatives of species that had learned to appreciate humanity's particular approach to healthcare delivery. "Ambassador," I said finally, "it's like this. If you're hurt, we want to help you feel better. If someone is hurting you, we want to help them stop. And if someone is hurting you because they think they can get away with it." I smiled. "Well, that's when we help them understand that there are consequences to that kind of thinking." "Consequences," the counselor repeated. "Educational consequences," I clarified. "We're very big on education. We believe everyone should understand the importance of maintaining good health, their own, their neighbors, and their former enemies. And if they don't learn, then we provide additional educational opportunities until they do." The silence that followed was the comfortable kind. The silence of people who understood exactly how things worked, and were perfectly fine with the arrangement. My comm unit chimed with the daily medical report from across human-patrolled space. 0 biological warfare incidents. 0 pandemic outbreaks. 0 requests for medical assistance that had been denied due to political complications. The galaxy had never been healthier. "Well," I said, standing up from the conference table, "if there are no other medical emergencies requiring immediate attention, I should get back to the ship. We've got a routine medical inspection scheduled for the Proxima system, and Admiral Knox wants to make sure we have adequate escort coverage." "How many ships does a routine medical inspection require?" asked the Altarian delegate. "Oh, just a light force," I said casually. "A couple of battle cruisers, maybe a carrier group for air support, and a dreadnought in case we run into any complications." "Complications?" "You know," I said, heading for the door. "Pirates, hostile forces, species that might have forgotten the importance of maintaining good medical practices. The usual stuff." As I left the conference room, I could hear the delegates discussing humanity's unique approach to healthcare among themselves. The conversation seemed to center around whether we were the most altruistic species in the galaxy or the most terrifying. Personally, I didn't see why it had to be either or. After all, the best medicine has always been preventive medicine, and nothing prevents medical emergencies quite like making sure everyone understands that harming innocent people is very, very bad for their health. The galaxy was finally learning that lesson, one comprehensive medical intervention at a time. And if that wasn't something worth celebrating, I didn't know what was. Dr. Ethan Cross, Chief Medical Officer of the Terran Medical Corps, concluded his report and leaned back in his chair. Outside his office window, the Third Fleet maintained its vigilant patrol of human-allied space, ensuring that medical emergencies remained a thing of the past. In the distance, the Indomitable was conducting what Admiral Knox called therapeutic gunnery exercises, a demonstration for visiting diplomats of the consequences of interfering with medical personnel. Cross smiled and reached for his next case file. The galaxy was a healthier place than it had been 6 months ago, and it was going to stay that way. After all, that's what humans did. We fixed things, even if we had to break a few heads to do it. End final medical statistics for the Terran Medical Intervention Program. Species saved from extinction: 1. Zephyrians. Additional species provided medical assistance: 16. Biological warfare incidents prevented: 47. Hostile forces educated about medical ethics: too many to count.